They made fun of her for adopting a black child, doubting she could ever understand him or even handle him at her age. But what they never expected was how he would change their lives forever. How did he earn their love? And what did it cost them both? Before we get into the story, comment below where in the world you are watching from today. The rain tapped against the window panes like gentle fingers as Catherine settled into her favorite armchair. The soft glow of her reading lamp cast a warm circle around her, making the living room feel cozy despite the gray evening outside. She lifted her teacup to her lips, savoring the comforting warmth of chamomile. On her lap lay a worn photo album, its pages slightly yellowed with time. Catherine's fingers traced the edges of a class photo from 5 years ago. 24 bright young faces smiled back at her, and she remembered each name, each personality. "Oh, Tommy," she whispered, touching a photo of a boy with untamed red hair. Always forgot his homework but never forgot to make everyone laugh. Her throat tightened as she turned the page to find a handmade card, decorated with wobbly hearts and written in purple crayon. "You're the best techer ever." More memories spilled from the pages. Pictures of science fairs, Christmas plays, and field day celebrations. Each image brought back the sound of children's laughter, the feeling of small hands raised eagerly to answer questions, the pride in watching her students grow and learn. Catherine closed the album and placed it on the side table, her heart heavy with an emptiness she couldn't quite shake. The house felt too quiet now, too still without the purpose that had driven her for 35 years. Her gaze drifted to the stack of papers on the coffee table. The adoption document sat there, crisp and official, waiting for her signature. Just seeing them made her think of Malik and his shy, sweet smile. During their visits, he'd clutch his teddy bear, a worn brown bear he'd named Super Bob, and tell her about his favorite superhero comics in soft, excited whispers. The memory brought warmth to her chest, but it also carried a twinge of anxiety. Sarah's words from yesterday's bridge club still stung. "At your age? And a black child? Really, Catherine? Have you thought this through?" Catherine picked up her teacup again, watching the steam rise in delicate swirls. She had thought it through. Every time Malik's face lit up when she entered the visiting room at the agency, every time he shyly reached for her hand, she felt it in her bones. This was right. The morning sun streamed through Catherine's bedroom window, waking her earlier than usual. Her heart fluttered as she pushed back the covers, knowing that today was the day she'd bring Malik home. She'd barely slept, but excitement gave her all the energy she needed. In what would soon be Malik's room, Catherine smoothed out the new bedspread covered in colorful superheroes. She arranged action figures on the dresser and lined up picture books on the small bookshelf, making sure their spines faced outward so he could easily see the titles. Fresh daisies brightened the kitchen table, their yellow petals catching the morning light. As the clock ticked toward noon, Catherine stood before her mirror, adjusting her cardigan for the third time. She'd practiced her words over breakfast. "Welcome home, Malik," and "This is your room now," and "I'm so happy you're here." Each phrase felt both right and somehow inadequate to express the joy in her heart. At the foster agency, the playroom looked exactly as it had during their previous visits. Blocks scattered on the carpet, crayon drawings taped to the walls. Malik sat in the corner, his brown teddy bear held close to his chest. His small shoulders tensed when the door opened. Catherine crouched down, careful to give him space. "Hi, Malik," she said softly. His dark eyes met hers, filled with a mixture of hope and uncertainty. He hugged his bear tighter. "I promise you'll be safe with me," Catherine said, her voice gentle. "There's so much love waiting for you at your new home." Malik didn't speak, but when Catherine stood and offered her hand, his small fingers reached up to grasp hers. The trust in that simple gesture made Catherine's heart swell with emotion. Together, they walked out of the playroom, Malik's hand warm and secure in hers, his bear tucked safely under his other arm. During the drive home, Catherine watched in the rearview mirror as Malik took in the passing scenery, his eyes wide with curiosity despite his silence. His teddy bear remained firmly in his embrace, a familiar comfort in this sea of change. The next morning, Sunlight warmed Catherine's kitchen as she placed a plate of scrambled eggs and buttered toast in front of Malik. His teddy bear sat propped against the chair beside him, watching over their breakfast. Malik picked at his eggs with his fork, taking small, careful bites. "Would you like to explore the neighborhood with me today?" Catherine asked gently. "We could see some nice shops and maybe visit the park." Malik nodded, his eyes fixed on his plate. Catherine could see the slight tension in his shoulders, the way his fingers gripped the fork a little too tightly. "It'll be fun, sweetheart," she said, reaching across to pat his hand. "We'll take it nice and slow, just the two of us." At the local bakery, the bell chimed as they stepped inside. The warm smell of fresh bread and cookies filled the air. Catherine guided Malik to the display case where rows of cookies and pastries sat on silver trays. His eyes widened at the sight of chocolate chip cookies still warm from the oven. As Catherine paid for the treat, she noticed the sideways glances from other customers. Some whispered behind their hands, others stared a bit too long. Malik seemed not to notice, too focused on the gooey chocolate chips melting on his fingers. At the park, children's laughter rang out across the playground. Malik straightened up, watching a group playing tag near the jungle gym. With a quick glance at Catherine for reassurance, he took a few tentative steps toward them. The children's laughter faded as they noticed him approach. One by one, they drifted away to another part of the playground, leaving Malik standing alone by the slide. His small shoulders slumped, and Catherine felt her heart crack at the sight. She walked over and knelt beside him. "How about we try out those swings? I bet I can go higher than you can." A tiny smile tugged at Malik's lips as he followed her to the swing set. Catherine helped him get settled, gave him a gentle push, and soon they were soaring together under the clear blue sky. The next morning's peace was broken by a sharp knock at Catherine's front door. She opened it to find Helen, her friend of 20 years, standing on the porch with an unusually tight smile. "I heard the news," Helen said, stepping inside without waiting for an invitation. Her eyes darted around the living room, lingering on Malik's small backpack near the couch. "The whole town's talking about it." And Catherine's stomach tightened as she led Helen to the kitchen. "Would you like some tea?" "Catherine," Helen began, ignoring the offer. "I need to speak frankly. Are you sure you've thought this through? At our age, taking on a child is challenging enough, but—" She paused, lowering her voice. "A black child? There will be complications." Catherine took a steady breath, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. "Malik is a wonderful boy, Helen. He's kind, gentle, and deserves a loving home." "I'm just concerned about you," Helen pressed. "The responsibility, the cultural differences, what people might say. What matters is that he's safe and loved," Catherine replied firmly, though her voice quivered slightly. "He's already brought so much joy to my life." After Helen left, Catherine stepped onto the porch for some fresh air. A group of neighbors stood chatting near the mailbox, their conversation dropping to whispers when they spotted her. She caught fragments of their words, "at her age," and "what was she thinking?" before turning back inside. That evening, Catherine stood in Malik's doorway, watching his peaceful sleeping form. The stuffed bear was tucked securely under his arm, his face relaxed in slumber. Tears pricked at her eyes as she silently renewed her commitment to protect and love him, regardless of what anyone else might think. Catherine adjusted Malik's collar one last time, smoothing down his favorite blue shirt. "You look so handsome," she said, giving him an encouraging smile. His eyes sparkled with hope, though his fingers fidgeted with the hem of his shirt. "Will there be other kids there?" he asked softly. "Yes, sweetheart. And I bet they'd love to hear about your superhero collection." At the neighborhood gathering, the summer air buzzed with conversation and the smell of grilled hamburgers. Catherine noticed the sideways glances and whispers as she and Malik made their way through the crowd. She squeezed his hand reassuringly before he spotted a group of children playing near the oak tree. "Go on," she encouraged. "Just be yourself." Malik approached the children with careful steps, his shoulders straight despite his nervousness. "Hi," he said, waving slightly. "I like your Superman shirt." A boy smiled briefly, but before he could respond, a girl with pigtails, Emily, stepped forward, her face scrunched in confusion. "Why is your skin so dark?" she asked loudly. "My mommy says you don't belong here." The other children fell silent. Malik's smile crumbled, his small hands balling into fists at his sides. I, he stammered, his voice barely a whisper. Catherine watched the scene unfold, her heart breaking as Malik turned and walked back to her, his eyes glistening with unshed tears. She wrapped an arm around his shoulders, feeling him trembling slightly against her side. "I want to go home," he whispered. Without hesitation, Catherine guided him away from the gathering, ignoring the stares that followed them. That evening, as she tucked him into bed, she held him close. "You are perfect just the way you are," she said firmly, wiping a tear from his cheek. "Don't let anyone make you feel different." Malik clutched his bear tighter. "Promise you won't leave me?" "I promise, sweetheart. We're in this together no matter what." After Malik drifted off to sleep, Catherine sat in her living room, the weight of the day heavy on her shoulders. She watched the moonlight cast shadows through the window, contemplating the challenges that lay ahead. Catherine stirred her morning coffee, the events from yesterday weighing heavily on her mind. She picked up her phone and dialed Martha's number, needing the comfort of her oldest friend. "Martha, could you come over? I really need someone to talk to." Within the hour, Martha arrived with fresh pastries and a warm hug. They settled onto the front porch, where the morning sun cast a gentle warmth over their shoulders. "Oh, Martha," Catherine sighed, her voice trembling. "You should have seen his face when that little girl said those awful things. He looked so hurt, so confused." Martha reached over and squeezed Catherine's hand. "You're doing something incredible here, Catherine. Don't let anyone make you doubt that. Sometimes I wonder if I'm strong enough to protect him from all this," Catherine admitted, wiping away a tear. "I knew it would be challenging, but seeing him hurt like that—" "Listen to me," Martha said firmly. "You're one of the strongest people I know. And what you're doing for Malik, that takes real courage." They sat in comfortable silence for a moment before Martha brightened. "You know what? We should organize something at the community center. Maybe a children's reading hour? Malik could share his favorite superhero stories." Catherine felt a spark of hope. "You really think that would help?" "Of course. Let people see what a wonderful boy he is. Sometimes people just need a chance to open their hearts." When Martha stood to leave, she wrapped Catherine in a tight hug. "We'll figure this out together," she promised. Catherine watched her friend walk down the sidewalk, feeling lighter than she had all morning. She found Malik in his room, carefully arranging his action figures. "Hey, sweetheart," she said softly. "How would you like to have a special day soon to meet some new friends?" Malik looked up at her, offering a small but genuine smile that warmed her heart. Catherine woke up early Saturday morning, her heart filled with anticipation. She'd spent years volunteering at the local animal shelter, and today she would share that special place with Malik. Over breakfast, she watched Malik carefully spread jam on his toast. "I have a surprise for you today," she said, smiling. "We're going to visit some very special friends of mine." Malik looked up, curious. "What kind of friends?" "Well, they have 4 legs, fur, and lots of love to give," Catherine explained. "They're dogs and cats who need someone to care for them, just like people sometimes do." Malik's eyes widened. "Real dogs and cats?" "That's right, and you know what? Sometimes they feel shy or scared, just like we all do sometimes. But with patience and kindness, they learn to trust again." When they arrived at the shelter, Malik held Catherine's hand tightly as they walked through the front door. The familiar sounds of barking and meowing filled the air. Mr. Hargrove, a tall man with silver hair and weathered hands, stood behind the counter. His usual stern expression softened slightly when he saw Catherine. "Mr. Hargrove, this is Malik," Catherine said warmly. "He's here to help today." Malik gave a small wave, partially hiding behind Catherine's leg. "Well now," Mr. Hargrove said gruffly, "we could always use more helping hands." Catherine guided Malik through the shelter, showing him how to fill water bowls and distribute food. His nervousness melted away as they worked, replaced by growing excitement. Then they met Rusty, a copper-colored mixed breed who usually hid in the back of his kennel. But something about Malik caught the dog's attention. Malik sat quietly by the kennel door, speaking softly to Rusty. "Hi there," he whispered. "It's okay. I get scared sometimes too." Catherine noticed Mr. Hargrove watching from the doorway as Rusty slowly crept forward, eventually letting Malik stroke his head through the fence. "Well, I'll be," Mr. Hargrove muttered, his gruff exterior cracking into a slight smile. "That dog hasn't come near anyone in weeks." As they prepared to leave, Malik could hardly contain his excitement. "Can we come back tomorrow, please? I want to see Rusty again." Catherine squeezed his hand as they walked to the car. "Of course we can, sweetheart. Of course we can." The morning sun painted golden streaks across the kitchen floor as Catherine prepared breakfast. It had been several days since their first visit to the shelter, and she marveled at how quickly they'd fallen into their new routine. Each morning, they'd walk hand in hand through the neighborhood, Malik pointing out interesting things he spotted: a butterfly, a shiny rock, or a particularly fluffy cloud. At the shelter, Malik had become everyone's favorite helper. His gentle way with the animals impressed even the most seasoned volunteers. Rusty, the once shy dog, now wagged his tail excitedly whenever Malik appeared. "Look, Miss Catherine," Malik would call out proudly. "Rusty learned to shake hands." One evening, as Catherine stirred a pot of spaghetti sauce, Malik sat at the kitchen counter, carefully tearing lettuce leaves for their salad. The comfortable silence between them was broken by his soft voice. "My mom used to sing when she cooked," he said quietly, his eyes fixed on the lettuce. "She had a pretty voice." Catherine's heart ached as she turned to face him. "Would you like to tell me more about her?" Malik nodded slowly. "She sang this song about sunshine. I don't remember all the words." He paused, his small fingers playing with the edge of a lettuce leaf. "And Dad, he told the best stories, about dragons and knights." Catherine moved closer, placing a gentle hand on his shoulder. "It's okay to miss them, sweetheart. Those are beautiful memories to keep in your heart. Do you think—" Malik hesitated, his voice barely a whisper. "Do you think they'd be happy I'm here with you?" "I believe they would be very happy knowing you're safe and loved," Catherine replied softly. "And while we make new memories together, we can always honor the precious ones you have of them." Malik leaned against her side, and Catherine wrapped him in a warm embrace, the sauce momentarily forgotten on the stove. They stood there together, sharing a moment of understanding that went beyond words. The morning air felt different as Catherine and Malik made their way to the animal shelter. Malik practically skipped beside her, his eyes bright with excitement. "Do you think Rusty missed me?" he asked, bouncing on his toes. "I'm sure he did, sweetheart, and the cats too." Catherine smiled, watching his face light up. At the shelter, Malik moved with newfound confidence among the animals. In the cat room, he noticed a gray tabby huddled in the corner, trembling. While other volunteers had tried unsuccessfully to coax it out, Malik approached slowly, speaking in soft whispers. "It's okay," he murmured, sitting cross-legged on the floor. "Nobody's gonna hurt you." Mr. Hargrove stood in the doorway, watching intently as the frightened cat gradually inched toward Malik. After several patient minutes, the cat allowed Malik to stroke its fur, eventually curling up in his lap. "Well, I'll be," Mr. Hargrove muttered to Catherine. "That cat hasn't let anyone near it for days. The boy's got a special touch, that's for sure." Throughout the morning, several elderly volunteers who had once kept their distance began approaching Malik. Mrs. Peterson asked him about his favorite animals, while Mr. Jenkins showed him how to prepare the special food for the older cats. "Such a gentle soul," Mrs. Peterson whispered to Catherine. "We could use more helpers like him." Catherine's chest tightened with emotion as she watched Malik bloom under their attention, his smile growing wider with each interaction. Walking home later, Catherine looked down at Malik, who was practically glowing from the praise he'd received. "I'm so proud of you," she said softly. "You did wonderful work today." Malik wrapped his arms around her waist in a tight hug, and in that embrace, Catherine felt all the words he didn't need to say. He finally felt like he belonged. The crisp autumn morning held promise as Catherine and Malik stepped outside, ready for their daily walk to the bakery. The air smelled of fallen leaves and possibility. "Can I get a chocolate croissant?" Malik asked, his hand warm in Catherine's. But Catherine froze at the sight before them. Cruel letters sprawled across their white fence, ugly words meant to hurt. Her heart crashed in her chest as Malik's eyes found the graffiti. "What does it say?" he whispered, his voice small and confused. Catherine quickly knelt beside him, turning his face away from the hateful message. "Let's go inside, sweetheart." Back in their kitchen, Malik sat at the table, his shoulders slumped. "Do people hate me?" "No, darling," Catherine said, her voice gentle but firm. "Remember Mr. Hargrove, how he smiles when you help with Rusty, and Mrs. Peterson, who always saves special treats for you?" Malik nodded slowly, but his eyes remained downcast. Catherine reached for the phone, dialing Martha's number. Within minutes, Martha arrived, her face flushed with anger. "This is absolutely disgraceful," Martha fumed, hauling paint cans from her car. "We'll fix this right now." They worked together, brushes sweeping white paint over the ugly words. Martha handed Malik a small brush, and he joined them, carefully painting the lower sections of the fence. "See how beautiful it looks when we work together?" Catherine said, watching Malik's careful strokes. When they finished, Catherine pulled Malik into a tight hug. "Love always wins, sweetheart. Always." Malik squeezed her back, his paintbrush still clutched in his small hand as he looked at their freshly painted fence. That evening at dinner, Catherine noticed something different in his eyes, a quiet strength like a small flame refusing to be extinguished. The soft glow of Malik's nightlight cast shadows on the ceiling as Catherine passed his room. She paused, noticing his small form still awake, eyes fixed upward in thought. "Can't sleep, sweetheart?" she asked softly, pulling up his desk chair. Malik shifted under his superhero blanket but didn't answer right away. Catherine waited patiently, knowing sometimes silence spoke louder than words. "Miss Catherine," he finally whispered, his voice trembling slightly. "Why do some people treat me different?" The question hit Catherine like a physical blow. She reached out and took his small hand in hers, choosing her words carefully. "Sometimes, honey, people act mean because they don't understand things that are different from what they know," she explained gently. "It's like when you first met Rusty at the shelter. Remember how scared he was?" Malik nodded, squeezing her hand. "He was afraid because he didn't know you yet. But you showed him kindness, and now he loves you. Some people are like that too. They're afraid of what they don't know. But that's not your fault, and it doesn't make you any less special. But will they always be mean?" Malik's eyes glistened in the dim light. "No, sweetheart. Your kindness, the way you care for the animals, how gentle you are, that's so important. It helps people see the world differently." Catherine smiled softly. "I dream of a world where everyone loves each other, no matter what they look like, and you're helping make that world real just by being you." She tucked the blanket around him more snugly. "I promise you, Malik, I'll always be right here beside you, no matter what happens." Malik's eyes started to grow heavy, but a small smile played at his lips. Catherine sat with him, holding his hand until his breathing grew steady and deep. She watched his peaceful face, her heart full of love and determination, before quietly rising and leaving his room. Catherine sat at her kitchen table early the next morning, phone in hand, excitement building as she dialed Martha's number. "Martha, I've had an idea," she said, watching Malik nibble his toast at the table. "What if we organized a gathering at the animal shelter? Let everyone see how special Malik is with the animals." "Catherine, that's brilliant," Martha's enthusiasm crackled through the phone. "We could make it a proper community event. I'll help with everything." Over the next few days, Catherine and Malik threw themselves into preparations. They created colorful flyers with pictures of shelter animals, and Malik proudly helped tape them up around town. The shelter slowly transformed with cheerful decorations. Streamers hung from the ceiling, and paw print cutouts dotted the walls. On the morning of the gathering, Catherine's stomach fluttered with nerves as she watched the first few neighbors trickle in. Some wore guarded expressions, others seemed merely curious. Mr. Hargrove stood by the entrance, greeting people with unexpected warmth. "Would you like to meet Rusty?" Malik asked a couple who had been watching him from across the room. His voice was soft but clear as he led them to the gentle dog's kennel. "He was scared at first, just like me. But now he's my friend." Catherine watched as her neighbors' faces softened while observing Malik. He moved from animal to animal, explaining each one's personality with such care and understanding that even the most skeptical guests couldn't help but smile. "He's quite remarkable with them," Mrs. Peterson, who had initially been one of the most vocal critics, admitted to Catherine. "Will he be coming to the shelter regularly?" As the afternoon wound down, more neighbors approached Catherine with kind words and encouragement. Some even asked about volunteer opportunities, wanting to work alongside Malik with the animals. While they cleaned up afterward, Malik beamed at Catherine, his face glowing with joy. He clutched her hand as they walked home, chattering excitedly about each animal he'd introduced to their neighbors. The following Monday dawned bright and crisp. Catherine helped Malik button up his favorite superhero shirt, smoothing down the collar with gentle hands. "Ready for your first day, sweetheart?" she asked, watching him clutch his stuffed bear closer. Malik nodded, but his fingers tightened around the bear's worn fur. They walked hand in hand down the sidewalk, fallen leaves crunching beneath their feet. Catherine could feel the slight tremble in his small hand. At the school entrance, Catherine knelt down to Malik's level. "Remember what we talked about? You're brave and kind, and those are wonderful things to be." "What if they don't like me?" Malik whispered. "Just be yourself," Catherine said, straightening his backpack. "Some of the nicest friends come unexpected, like Rusty at the shelter." Inside the classroom, Catherine lingered by the doorway, her heart racing as she watched Malik find his desk. Other children glanced his way, some whispering to each other. A girl with pigtails approached him first, asking about his bear. 2 boys joined them, one smiling warmly while the other kept his distance. "My mom says he's different," Catherine overheard one child say, making her chest tighten. But Malik remained composed, carefully placing his bear in his cubby. When the teacher announced art time, he joined a table of children, sharing crayons and offering a shy smile. Some kids smiled back, while others simply turned away. At pickup time, Malik bounded toward Catherine, his backpack bouncing. "How was your day, sweetie?" she asked as they started their walk home. "I made a picture," Malik said, pulling out a colorful drawing. "And Sarah likes superheroes, too." He chattered about the art project and playground games, skimming over the moments when some classmates had kept their distance. Catherine squeezed his hand, her heart swelling with pride at his resilience. Looking down at his bright face, she saw hope shining through despite the day's challenges. A gentle knock echoed through Catherine's house a few days after Malik started school. Opening the door, she found Mrs. Thompson, her elderly neighbor, standing on the porch with an apple pie in her hands. Catherine noticed the slight tremor in Mrs. Thompson's usually steady grip. "I thought you both might enjoy this," Mrs. Thompson said softly, her eyes showing a warmth Catherine hadn't seen before. Catherine invited her in, and they settled in the living room. The afternoon sun streamed through the windows as Mrs. Thompson carefully placed the pie on the coffee table. "I've been watching Malik at school," Mrs. Thompson began, smoothing her skirt. "My granddaughter is in his class. He's such a gentle soul. And the way he is with those animals at the shelter." Her voice trailed off. "Thank you," Catherine replied, touched by the unexpected praise. Mrs. Thompson's eyes grew misty. "I need to apologize, Catherine. I was wrong about him, about both of you. I let my old ways of thinking cloud my judgment." She went on to share stories from her own past about growing up in a different time with different beliefs. But seeing Malik's kindness, how patient he is with those shelter animals, it made me realize how foolish I've been. Catherine listened intently as Mrs. Thompson opened up about her journey from skepticism to understanding. The afternoon light grew softer as they talked, 2 women bridging a gap that had once seemed uncrossable. As Mrs. Thompson prepared to leave, she paused at the door. "If you or Malik ever need anything at all, please don't hesitate to call." Her smile was small but genuine. Catherine watched her walk down the garden path, feeling a flutter of hope in her chest. This unexpected visit represented something precious, the power of hearts and minds slowly opening to change. The kitchen filled with warm, sweet aromas as Catherine and Malik stood side by side at the counter, mixing pancake batter. Malik carefully stirred while Catherine added chocolate chips, their weekend ritual bringing smiles to both their faces. "Your birthday's coming up soon," Catherine said softly. "What kind of celebration would you like?" Malik's spoon slowed. "I never had a real party before," he said quietly, eyes fixed on the batter. "At the foster home, we just had cupcakes sometimes." Catherine's heart squeezed. "Well, this year will be different. How about we throw you a wonderful party?" His eyes lit up. "Really?" After breakfast, they drove to the craft store where Malik's excitement grew with each aisle they explored. His small hands reached for bright blue streamers, matching balloons, and superhero decorations that made his eyes sparkle. "Can I get these?" he asked, holding up some Spider-Man plates. "Of course, sweetheart, pick whatever you like." Back home, Catherine called Martha while Malik arranged his party supplies on the kitchen table. "Martha, I need your help planning something special," Catherine explained. "We're throwing Malik his first real birthday party." "Count me in," Martha replied warmly. "What do you need?" They spent the afternoon creating invitations, with Malik carefully decorating each one. His tongue stuck out slightly as he concentrated on drawing little superheroes on the cards. Catherine watched him work, noting how his face glowed with pride as he finished each invitation. "This one's for Mr. Hargrove," he said, holding up a card decorated with tiny dogs and cats. "And this one's for Emily from school." That evening, Malik sat cross-legged on the floor, admiring the stack of completed invitations. His smile was so bright it made Catherine's heart soar. "Time for bed, birthday boy," she said gently. "But it's not my birthday yet," he giggled. "Well, almost birthday boy then," Catherine laughed, leading him upstairs. As she tucked him in, Malik hugged her tight. "Thank you for my party," he whispered. "It's going to be wonderful," Catherine promised, kissing his forehead. Catherine and Martha sat at the dining table, surrounded by party planning supplies and lists. Sunlight streamed through the window as they discussed the details for Malik's special day. "I think we should make it extra meaningful," Catherine said, smoothing out a piece of paper. "What if we create a wish wall where guests can write kind messages for Malik?" Martha's eyes lit up. "That's perfect. We could get colorful cards and markers. It'll show him how many people care." As they worked through the menu and game ideas, Catherine felt hope bloom in her chest. Maybe this party could help bridge the gap between Malik and the community. The next few days, Catherine and Malik walked door to door delivering invitations. Some neighbors, like the Wilsons, welcomed them warmly. "We'd love to come," Mrs. Wilson exclaimed, making Malik beam. Others barely opened their doors, taking the invitations with tight smiles and non-committal responses. Mrs. Green's reaction stung the most. "Going through an awful lot of trouble, aren't you?" she said, eyeing the superhero-themed invitation. "For a birthday party, I mean." Catherine felt her optimism falter but kept her voice steady. "Every child deserves to feel special on their birthday." Back home, she and Martha worked on gathering supplies, carefully selecting decorations in Malik's favorite colors. They ordered a cake featuring Spider-Man, knowing how much it would delight him. "The bakery said they can add extra webbing details," Martha said, showing Catherine the design. Catherine nodded, but worry crept into her thoughts. Would enough people come? Would they truly celebrate Malik? That evening, she found Malik sitting quietly on the couch, clutching his stuffed bear. His usual sparkle seemed dimmed. "Come here, sweetheart," she said, pulling him into a warm hug. "No matter what, we're going to have the most wonderful time at your party." Malik squeezed her back, his smile returning slightly as he headed up to bed. The morning sun cast a gentle warmth over Catherine's backyard as she and Martha hung colorful streamers between trees. Malik darted back and forth across the lawn, his eyes sparkling with excitement. "Can I help with the balloons?" he asked, bouncing on his toes. "Of course, sweetheart," Catherine smiled, handing him a bunch of red and blue balloons to tie to the chairs. The wish wall stood proudly near the cake table, decorated with superhero stickers and waiting for messages of love. Martha arranged plates and cups while Catherine set up game stations with Pin the Mask on the superhero and a beanbag toss. As the party time approached, the first guests arrived, elderly volunteers from the shelter who had grown fond of Malik. Mr. Hargrove brought a carefully wrapped present, his usual gruff expression softened by a smile. Malik kept glancing at the gate, his small hands fidgeting with his shirt. Catherine felt her heart tighten, knowing he was hoping for children his age to show up. Then, to her relief, the Peterson kids came through the gate with their mother. Soon after, the Wilsons arrived with their twins. More families followed, carrying gifts and looking around with cautious but friendly expressions. "Look, Catherine," Malik called out, his face beaming. "Tommy from my class came." He rushed to greet his classmate, proudly showing him the superhero decorations and game stations. The backyard filled with children's laughter and adult chatter. Neighbors who had once been distant were now mingling, sharing punch and conversation. The wish wall began filling with colorful notes as guests wrote messages for Malik. Catherine watched as her backyard transformed into exactly what she'd hoped for, a space filled with acceptance and joy, where Malik could feel truly celebrated. The backyard buzzed with excitement as Malik darted between games and friends, his red cape fluttering behind him. Catherine leaned against the refreshment table, watching him laugh and play tag with his classmates. Her eyes misted over as she saw him completely at ease, just being a regular kid having fun at his birthday party. "He's quite something, isn't he?" Martha whispered, squeezing Catherine's hand. Near the punch bowl, a small group of parents gathered, their initial stiffness beginning to fade. Sarah Green, who had been one of the most vocal critics, stepped closer to Catherine. I wasn't sure about coming today," Sarah admitted, her voice soft. "But seeing all this effort you've put in for him, how happy he makes the other children." She paused, watching as Malik helped a younger child reach a party favor. "I was wrong about him, about you both." Another mother nodded in agreement. "My Tommy talks about him all the time now, about how kind he is at the shelter. He told me Malik helped him overcome his fear of dogs last week." "He's such a gentle soul," added Mrs. Wilson, whose twins were playing superhero games with Malik. "The way he includes everyone makes sure no one feels left out." One by one, parents approached Catherine, sharing stories of Malik's impact on their children and the community. Catherine listened, her heart swelling with each new revelation of how her boy had touched their lives. The previous tension that had hung over their neighborhood seemed to dissolve in the warm afternoon air, replaced by genuine appreciation and understanding. Martha stood beside Catherine, beaming as she watched the walls of prejudice crumble through simple conversations and shared experiences. The parents who had once crossed the street to avoid them were now standing in Catherine's backyard, their faces showing genuine remorse for their previous behavior. The backyard hummed with life as children darted between colorful balloons and streamers. Malik's superhero cape fluttered behind him as he led a game of tag, his laughter ringing clear across the yard. Catherine stood by the refreshment table with Martha, watching her son's face light up with pure joy. "Look at him," Martha whispered, squeezing Catherine's hand. "He's absolutely glowing." Sarah approached them hesitantly, holding a paper plate with birthday cake. "Catherine, I need to tell you something. Seeing all this effort you've put into making today special for Malik." She paused, watching as Malik helped a smaller child reach for a party favor. "Well, it's made me realize how wrong I was." Mrs. Thompson joined them, nodding in agreement. "The way he is at the shelter, so gentle with those animals. I've never seen anyone connect with them quite like he does." More parents gathered around, sharing stories about Malik's kindness to their children and his impact on the community. Catherine listened, her heart full as she watched the invisible barriers between them dissolve. Near the wish wall, children clustered together, scribbling colorful messages. "You're the best friend ever," one note read. "Thank you for helping me not be scared of dogs," said another. Each message brought fresh tears to Catherine's eyes as she realized how deeply Malik had touched their lives. "He's changed all of us," Mrs. Thompson admitted softly. "Made us see things differently." The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the yard as Malik continued playing with his friends, unaware of the profound shift happening among the adults. Catherine watched him, feeling the weight of past struggles lifting with each genuine smile and warm conversation around her. Just as the party was winding down, Mr. Hargrove stepped forward, carrying a large box wrapped in bright paper with a blue ribbon. "Malik," he called out, his usually gruff voice softened with warmth. "I have something special for you." The remaining guests gathered around as Malik carefully untied the ribbon. His small fingers worked at the paper, and suddenly a tiny whimper came from inside. Malik's eyes grew wide as he lifted the lid to reveal a fluffy puppy with golden fur, its tail wagging tentatively. "Oh," Malik gasped, his hands trembling with excitement as he reached for the puppy. The small creature snuggled into his arms immediately, and tears of joy sparkled in Malik's eyes. Mr. Hargrove cleared his throat. "You've shown so much love at the shelter, Malik. This little one needs a home, and I know you'll give him all the care he deserves." The neighborhood children crowded around, their faces bright with excitement as they took turns gently petting the puppy. "What will you name him?" Emily asked, the same girl who had once been unkind to Malik. "Rusty," Malik said without hesitation, thinking of his favorite shelter dog. "Just like my friend at the shelter." Parents wiped away tears as they watched the scene unfold. Mrs. Thompson dabbed at her eyes with a tissue, and even some of the previously skeptical neighbors seemed moved by the pure joy on Malik's face. "The way he connects with animals," one neighbor whispered to another. "It's truly special." As the last guests prepared to leave, Malik held Rusty close, his smile radiant. "Thank you, Mr. Hargrove," he said softly, then looked up at Catherine. "Can we really keep him, Mom?" Catherine wrapped her arms around both Malik and his new puppy, her heart full of gratitude for this moment of acceptance and love. The morning sun filtered through Malik's bedroom window as Catherine gently shook him awake. "Time for school, sweetheart," she said softly. But something wasn't right. Malik's usual bright smile was missing, and his face looked pale and drawn. At breakfast, Malik just pushed his cereal around the bowl. His shoulders slumped. "I don't feel good," he whispered, his voice weak. Catherine pressed her hand to his forehead. "You're a bit warm, honey. Let's keep you home today and get some rest." As the morning turned to afternoon, Malik's condition deteriorated. His fever spiked, and he could barely keep his eyes open. Catherine's heart raced with worry as she dialed Martha's number. "Something's wrong," Catherine's voice trembled. "He's burning up." Martha arrived within minutes, took one look at Malik, and said firmly, "We need to get him to the hospital. Now." At the emergency room, doctors quickly admitted Malik, hooking him up to monitors while Catherine held his small hand, fighting back tears. Martha stayed close, her steady presence a comfort in the sterile hospital room. Word spread quickly through their tight-knit community. Soon the hospital waiting room filled with familiar faces. Mrs. Thompson brought coffee and sandwiches. Mr. Hargrove sat quietly in the corner, his weathered face creased with concern. Even Sarah, who had once viewed Catherine's adoption with skepticism, arrived with a stuffed animal for Malik. "We're all here for you both," Mrs. Thompson said, squeezing Catherine's shoulder. As night settled over the hospital, Catherine maintained her vigil by Malik's bedside. The steady beep of monitors filled the quiet room, while concerned neighbors waited outside, their presence a testament to how much Malik had touched their lives. Catherine held his small hand, whispering words of comfort as they waited for news about his condition. The hospital corridor lights dimmed as night settled in. Catherine sat in the uncomfortable chair beside Malik's bed, watching his chest rise and fall with each breath. The soft beeping of monitors filled the quiet room, but beyond the door she could hear the gentle murmur of voices, her neighbors keeping their own watch in the waiting room. Mrs. Thompson slipped into the room with a steaming cup of tea. "You should drink something, dear," she whispered, placing the cup in Catherine's hands. "I remember when I first saw you with Malik. I was so wrong to doubt you both." Catherine wrapped her fingers around the warm cup, managing a small smile. "Thank you for being here now." Throughout the long hours, neighbors took turns sitting with her. Mr. Hargrove settled into the chair by the window, his weathered face soft with concern. "Remember how gentle he was with that scared cat at the shelter?" he said quietly. "Never seen anything like it. That boy has a special gift." More neighbors came and went, bringing sandwiches that Catherine barely touched, sharing stories, and offering quiet words of support. Some simply sat in companionable silence, their presence a comfort in the sterile hospital room. Looking at their faces, faces that had once shown judgment or doubt, Catherine felt overwhelmed by the change. These people who had once whispered behind closed doors about her decision to adopt Malik now formed a protective circle around them both. As the night deepened, Catherine watched the first hints of dawn paint the sky outside the window. The waiting room still held several neighbors who had stayed through the night, their dedication a testament to how deeply Malik had touched their lives. Surrounded by their steadfast support, Catherine bowed her head in silent prayer for her son's recovery, feeling stronger than she had hours before. The morning sunlight streamed through the hospital window as the doctor gently touched Catherine's shoulder, waking her from her light doze. His kind eyes and reassuring smile immediately eased some of her anxiety. "Mrs. Miller," he said softly, "I have good news. Malik has a viral infection that caused the fever and fatigue, but with proper rest and care, he should make a full recovery." Catherine's tears flowed freely as relief washed over her. She squeezed Malik's small hand, her heart lighter than it had been in hours. Stepping into the hallway, she called Martha, her voice shaking with emotion. "He's going to be okay," she whispered. Martha's excited response was followed by the sound of her sharing the news with the waiting neighbors. Soon, a steady stream of visitors tiptoed into the room. Mrs. Thompson brought a handmade card covered in glitter and hearts. Mr. Hargrove arrived with a small stuffed dog that looked just like Rusty. Sarah, clutching fresh flowers, smiled warmly at Malik. Though tired, Malik's eyes lit up at each visitor. "Thank you," he whispered, his smile weak but genuine. He carefully arranged each gift on his bedside table, touching them with gentle appreciation. Catherine watched in amazement as neighbor after neighbor came to show their support. The room filled with cards, flowers, and small gifts, each one a testament to how deeply Malik had touched their lives. As the last visitors left, Catherine settled back in her chair beside Malik's bed. She held his hand, watching him drift off to sleep, surrounded by tokens of love from their community. A profound sense of peace settled over her as she realized they had found not just acceptance, but true belonging. After several days in the hospital, Catherine helped Malik pack up his get-well cards and gifts. His steps were still a bit wobbly, but his smile had returned. As they walked through the hospital corridors, Catherine kept a protective arm around his shoulders. "Ready to go home, sweetheart?" she asked, helping him into his jacket. Malik nodded eagerly. "I miss Rusty." When they pushed through the hospital's main doors, they stopped in surprise. There, gathered on the sidewalk, stood dozens of their neighbors. They held colorful balloons and handmade signs, their faces beaming with warmth. "Welcome back, Malik," they called out in cheerful voices. As they walked toward their house, Catherine's eyes widened. Their front yard had been transformed. Bright banners hung between trees proclaiming, "Welcome home, Malik," and "We love you," in rainbow letters. Flowers dotted their garden and streamers danced in the breeze. Mrs. Thompson approached with a steaming casserole. "So you don't have to worry about cooking," she said with a gentle smile. Other neighbors followed, arms full of baked goods and prepared meals. Mr. Hargrove stepped forward, holding something behind his back. "Hey, buddy," he said, kneeling to Malik's level. "I got something for Rusty." He presented a small red collar and matching leash. "Every good dog needs proper walking gear." Malik's eyes sparkled as he carefully took the gifts. "Thank you," he whispered, running his fingers over the soft material. Catherine watched as neighbors gathered around Malik, each offering warm words and gentle hugs. Her heart felt full to bursting. Just months ago, she'd worried about acceptance. Now, watching Malik surrounded by genuine love and support, she realized they'd found more than acceptance. They'd found true belonging. Inside their home, Catherine helped Malik settle onto the couch, arranging pillows behind his back. They sat together, taking in the sight of all the gifts and cards spread around them. "You know what?" Catherine said softly. "You've brought so much kindness and unity to our community." Malik responded by wrapping his arms around her in a tight hug, his face glowing with happiness and love. The autumn breeze rustled through the trees as Catherine, Malik, and Rusty took their morning walk. Malik's steps were steady now, his cheeks rosy with renewed health. Rusty trotted happily beside them, his red leash held carefully in Malik's small hand. "Good morning, Malik," called Mrs. Peterson from her garden. "Those flowers you planted are blooming beautifully." Malik waved shyly, his smile brightening. Every few houses, someone would stop to greet them, bent down to pet Rusty, or asked how Malik was feeling. Mr. Hargrove appeared from around the corner, his familiar, weathered face breaking into a warm smile. "There's my favorite helper," he said, falling into step beside them. "The shelter's not the same without you, young man. Even the most nervous cats seem to miss your gentle touch." As they passed the local park, Mrs. Thompson and Sarah joined their growing group. "Malik, you've shown us all what true strength looks like," Sarah said softly, her earlier prejudice completely forgotten. "The way you handled being sick with such bravery, well, it taught us all something important." Mrs. Thompson nodded in agreement. "You've brought out the best in our community, dear." Malik listened quietly, his fingers absently stroking Rusty's fur. Though shy about the attention, his eyes shone with quiet joy. Catherine watched her son, seeing not just the little boy she'd chosen to love, but a child who had earned the community's respect and admiration all on his own. As they turned toward home, Malik's small hand found Catherine's. "Thank you, Mom," he whispered, "for believing in me." Catherine squeezed his hand, her heart full of gratitude for how far they'd come together. Over the next few days, Catherine and Malik fell into a comfortable rhythm. Their morning walks with Rusty became a neighborhood highlight, with friendly faces waving from porches and gardens. The familiar route to the shelter felt different now, warmer somehow, filled with greetings and quick chats with neighbors. "Need any help with groceries this week, Catherine?" Mrs. Thompson would call out from her yard. "I'm heading to the store tomorrow." Sarah dropped by with fresh-baked cookies, staying for tea and conversation while Malik played with Rusty in the backyard. The house that had once felt isolated now buzzed with the energy of frequent visitors and caring neighbors. One sunny afternoon at the shelter, Malik sat cross-legged on the floor, speaking softly to a trembling gray kitten hiding in the corner. A group of new volunteers watched in amazement as the tiny cat gradually crept toward his outstretched hand. "He has a gift," whispered one volunteer to Catherine. "Mr. Hargrove told us about him, but seeing it in person..." The kitten finally pressed its head against Malik's palm, purring softly. Catherine watched her son's face light up with quiet joy, his gentle nature drawing out trust from the frightened animal. Other volunteers gathered around, taking mental notes of his patient approach. "Could you show us how you do that?" asked another volunteer, her eyes wide with admiration. Malik nodded shyly and began explaining in his soft voice how to read the animal's body language, how to let them come to you. The volunteers listened intently, their faces showing newfound understanding. As they prepared to leave that afternoon, Catherine hugged Malik close. "I'm so proud of you, sweetheart," she said warmly. "You're helping so many people and animals." Malik smiled up at her, his eyes bright with happiness. "I like helping," he said simply. "It feels like home here." Catherine felt her heart swell with joy, knowing they had found not just acceptance, but a true place of belonging in their community. One quiet evening, Catherine and Malik sat together on their front porch, watching the sun paint the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks. Rusty lay curled up at their feet, his tail twitching occasionally in his sleep. The gentle breeze carried the scent of blooming flowers from their garden, and Catherine felt her heart swell with emotion as she looked at her son. "You know," Catherine said softly, running her hand through Malik's hair, "when I was about your age, my mother used to take me to this little ice cream shop every Sunday after church. She'd always let me get 2 scoops even though my father said 1 was plenty." Malik looked up at her with curious eyes. "Really?" "Mm-hmm. And my father, he taught me that being kind was more important than being right. He would help anyone who needed it, even strangers." Catherine smiled at the memory. "That's what family does. They love you, support you, and teach you how to be your best self." Malik was quiet for a moment, then spoke in a small voice. "My first mom used to sing to me every night. I don't remember all the words, but it was pretty." He paused, fidgeting with the hem of his shirt. "And my first dad, he would make funny faces to make me laugh when I was sad." Catherine held him closer, her heart aching with love for this brave, beautiful child. "Those are precious memories, sweetheart. And you know what? Family isn't just about who shares your blood. It's about who shares your heart." "Like us?" Malik asked, his eyes bright with understanding. "Exactly like us," Catherine whispered, kissing the top of his head. "You filled my heart with so much joy, Malik. Having you as my son is the greatest blessing I could have ever asked for." Malik wrapped his arms around her waist. "I love you, Mom," he said simply, the words carrying all the weight of their shared journey. Over the next few weeks, Catherine noticed small but meaningful changes in their neighborhood. Mrs. Thompson, who had once kept her distance, now brought fresh-baked cookies every Sunday. Children who used to cross the street when they saw Malik now waved enthusiastically and asked to play with Rusty. "Look, Mom!" Malik exclaimed one afternoon, pointing to a group of kids heading to the shelter. "That's Tommy and Sarah from my class." Catherine smiled, watching as more families arrived at the shelter, their children eager to volunteer alongside Malik. Mr. Hargrove had even started a junior volunteer program, inspired by Malik's gentle way with the animals. One sunny morning, Catherine found an envelope in their mailbox, an invitation to speak at the upcoming community center event. Her hands trembled slightly as she read it. They wanted her to share her story of adopting Malik and their journey together. "I don't know," she murmured to Martha over coffee. "What if people aren't ready to hear it?" "They are," Martha assured her. "Your story could help others understand." At the event, Catherine stood at the podium, her voice steady despite her nerves. Malik sat in the front row, beaming up at her. She shared their story, the initial doubts she'd faced, the challenges they'd overcome, and the beautiful transformation they'd witnessed in their community. "Love," she said, her voice thick with emotion, "doesn't see color or age. It sees hearts." Many in the audience wiped away tears as she spoke. Afterward, people lined up to thank her. A young couple considering adoption asked for her advice. An elderly man admitted that her story had changed his perspective entirely. Malik watched it all with wide eyes, realizing that their journey had touched more lives than he'd ever imagined. He saw the way people looked at his mother, with respect, admiration, and gratitude, and felt a surge of pride warm his chest. They walked home together that evening, their joined hands swinging between them. The setting sun cast long shadows across their path, but their hearts were full of light. The park buzzed with excitement as neighbors gathered under the warm sunshine. Colorful balloons and streamers danced in the gentle breeze, and children ran laughing between decorated tables. Catherine held Malik's hand as they walked through the crowd, touched by the warm greetings that met them at every turn. "We're so glad you're part of our community," Mrs. Thompson said, giving Malik a gentle hug. The mayor, standing at a small podium, waved them forward. "Today we celebrate 2 very special people who have shown us the true meaning of love and acceptance." Catherine squeezed Malik's hand as they made their way to the stage. Looking out at the sea of friendly faces, she felt overwhelmed with gratitude. "When I first adopted Malik," Catherine began, her voice soft but clear, "I wasn't sure how our journey would unfold. But this community has shown us what true acceptance looks like. You've become our family." Malik stepped forward, his small voice carrying across the crowd. "Thank you for loving me and my mom," he said simply, causing several people to dab at their eyes. Mr. Hargrove approached them with a leather-bound book. "This is from all of us at the shelter," he said, opening it to reveal photos of Malik with the animals, surrounded by messages from volunteers. Sarah's mother presented them with a stack of handmade cards from the neighborhood children. The mayor unveiled a wooden plaque, its inscription reading, "Our community, our family." As the afternoon sun began to sink, Catherine and Malik found a quiet moment on a park bench. Malik nestled against her side, and Catherine wrapped her arm around him, watching their neighbors laughing and chatting nearby. The love surrounding them felt complete, perfect, and real. If you enjoyed the story of Catherine, I hand-picked this next story that you will enjoy. Please don't miss this one. Click here to watch it.